Well, hello and welcome to the African News on Voice of the People Television. I am David Edwin. Before we begin the news, we want to kindly visit our website, www.vop.ng, for fresh and trending news stories. We begin the African news from Ghana, where the government of Ghana has deported 3 Israeli nationals who arrived in the country on Wednesday in what appeared to be a tit-for-tat move over the alleged mistreatment of Ghanaian nationals at Ben Gurion International Airport in Israel. 7 Ghanaians, including 4 members of an official delegation attending a cybersecurity conference in Tel Aviv, were allegedly detained without explanation. They were released after 5 hours, while the 3 others were deported, according to Ghana, which condemned their humiliating treatment. Ghana's foreign ministry says a senior diplomat from the Israeli embassy in Ghana was summoned over the incident, and both countries have agreed to resolve the row amicably. Ghana's foreign ministry noted that the 2 countries have enjoyed decades of friendly relations, making Israel's alleged actions inconsistent with their historic ties. It added that the Ghana expects its citizens to be treated with dignity and respect in much the same way as other governments expect Ghana to treat their nationals. Elsewhere, the alleged leader of a failed coup in Benin Republic has sought refuge in neighboring Togo. 2 Beninese government officials have told newsmen demanding his immediate extradition. A dispute between the 2 small West African nations over Colonel Pascal Tigri and his alleged accomplices would risk deepening diplomatic divisions in West Africa, which has struggled to respond in a uniform way to a spat of coup in recent years. Soldiers briefly took control of Benin State television station on Sunday morning and claimed they had deposed President Patrice Talon, but Benin's armed forces, backed by Nigerian firepower and French intelligence and logistic support, thwarted the attempt. The soldiers identified Tigri as the coup leader. His whereabouts had previously been unknown. One of the Beninese officials said Tigri and others allegedly involved in the coup attempt were hidden out of a neighborhood in the Togolese capital Lomé, known as Lomé II, that also houses the residence of the country's long-term leader, Frédéric Ghassanibe. The officials who made the disclosure to newsmen said if the Togolese government does not extradite the offenders to Benin Republic, that will be the proof that Togo was involved in the coup attempt. Moving on, a daughter of South Africa's former President Jacob Zuma has been sworn into Parliament less than a fortnight after her half-sister was forced to step down. Brimelda Zuma became one of South Africa's newest MPs on Wednesday, representing Ntonkono Wezikwe MK, the opposition party led by her father. Her half-sister Duduzile Zuma Zambudla resigned from Parliament following allegation that she had tricked 17 men into fighting for Russia as missionaries in Ukraine. Zuma Zambudla has denied these allegations. Brimelda Zuma's appointment suggests the former president intends to ensure his family is represented in Parliament. Moving on to other stories, in another development, a U.S. House committee on Wednesday approved a bill that would review for another 3 years Washington's preferential trade program in Africa. And there was no immediate mention of excluding South Africa, and the U.S. trade envoy had said what was possible. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, a law first enacted in 2000, to provide duty-free access to the U.S. market for eligible sub-Saharan African countries and products, expired in September and hundreds of thousands of African jobs are estimated to depend on it. U.S. Trade Representative Jimmy Greer said earlier that the Trump administration was open to a one-year extension, but might exclude South Africa, which he described as a unique problem. The U.S. House Committee on Ways and Means approved the AGOA Extension Act by a vote of 37 to 3. A committee statement has said, describing the trade initiative as the cornerstone of economic relations between the U.S. and sub-Saharan African nations. Moving on, a Kenyan court has suspended a health funding agreement. The agreement signed by the government with the United States on December the 4th, worth more than $1.6 billion until it hears a data privacy case filed by a consumer protection group. The pact, signed in Washington, was the first of its kind under an overhaul of U.S. foreign and introduced during President Donald Trump's administration. Since signing the pact, other African nations, including Rwanda and Uganda, have signed similar agreements. Under these deals, countries received U.S. health funds, but are also required to increase their own domestic health spending. However, the Consumer Federation of Kenya petitioned the High Court to halt the agreement until concerns over the safety of citizens' data were addressed. In a statement, the Federation's decision-making, informed by Kenyan health data, must be public, auditable, and jointly supervised, with consumer representatives involved in data processing, monitoring, and evaluation, and independent oversight. High Court Judge Bahati Omwamue issued an order pausing the agreement, until the case is heard. Moving on, Armenia says it seeks closer green ties with Kenya in sustainable development in the country. Armenian Minister of Environment Habazum disclosed this when he met with Kenya's Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry, Deborah Barasa, to discuss expanding bilateral cooperation in environmental protection and forest management. Both sides also stressed the importance of knowledge exchange, implementing sustainable development programs, and strengthening international collaboration to effectively respond to global environmental changes. Minister Martin Vozian reaffirmed Armenia's readiness to deepen cooperation across various sectors based on mutual interest. The meeting also addressed the organization of the 17th Conference of the Parties, COP17, to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, which Armenia will host in October 2026. The minister emphasized Armenia's commitment to closely work with partner countries for the effective organization of COP17 and expressed hope of high-level Kenyan participation. Away from that report, rebel forces have entered the last government-held city in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, in an offensive that has forced thousands to flee across the border into Burundi, according to residential statements. Heavy artillery and gunfire could have been heard in Uvira, with terrified residents describing the situation as chaotic. The escalation in fighting comes despite the peace deal brokered by U.S. President Donald Trump last week between DR Congo, the President Felix Tshisekedi, and Rwanda's President Paul Kagame to end the long-running conflict. The M23 rebels said it had liberated the city, while UN-backed Radio Okapi quoted residents as saying that rebel fighters were on major streets. However, South Kivu Governor Jean-Jacques Peruzzi told local media that the army and allied militia remained in control of the city, which is just 27 kilometers from Burundi's capital, Bujumbura, across Lake Tanganyika. Moving on to other stories, the government of Eastern Equatorial State in South Sudan has confirmed that 2 senior officials from South Sudan People's Defense Forces, that's the SSPDF, were killed and 6 others injured after suspected SPLMO-IO fighters ambushed a government convoy in Moti Boma in Wotu Payam of Torit County. According to a statement by the State Minister of Information and Communication, Mark Lutiyu, the attack occurred at around 9:30 a.m. on December the 9th as the acting governor of Eastern Equatorial State, Akilio Mbeya, was leading a high-level delegation to meet displaced communities in Ifwutu Payam. The delegation included the technical advisor on security and governance, the Division 7 Commander, the Director of National Security, the Assistant Police Commissioner, and SPLM-IO officers who recently joined SSPDF and other military and government officials. The statement said 6 others were wounded, adding that 2 have been evacuated to Juba for further medical treatment, while the remaining officers are being treated in Torit State Hospital. You're still watching the African News right here on Voice of the People Television. We'll go straight to the analysis segment of the news now. And of course, joining us to make sense of these stories and more in the studio with us is Mr. Dele Fanimo. Mr. Fanimo is a seasoned reporter right here in Nigeria, and he is a political and public affairs commentator and analyst. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Daly.
Good afternoon once again.
Thank you so very much for being a part of this conversation. Let's jump right into it. Interestingly, South Sudan again is in the news, and of course, some very serious conversation here, particularly on the fact where six of the government convoy was ambushed, and of course, 2 officers were killed, and of course, 6 injured. From your perspective, particularly on the part that South Sudan is still on that level of unrest, of insecurity, how would you describe this situation in South Sudan, and what can be done to put an end to this endless situation of consistent fighting, both between the first Vice President Riek Machar and, of course, the President Salva Kiir in South Sudan?
You see, the main crux of this matter is the struggle for the soul of Sudan. You know that sometimes when I talk, I look at the example of Eritrea and Ethiopia.
Okay.
I look at the example of Herzegovina and Slovenia. I look at South Sudan and Sudan. You see, that's why when I talk, I will tell you that, look, even if we balkanize this country into various enclaves, like Odua Republic, Biafra Republic, Arewa Republic, and many other minority republics, it's not a guarantee that there will be peace in this country. Because the drive towards independence through this balkanization of existing geographical expression, because I call these countries as geographical expression, is rapacious inclination to hold on to power, which is a precursor to holding on to resources embedded in this country. South Sudan is rich in mineral resources, just like the DCR, where you have the M23 rebels.
Yes.
And so, the first thing that you notice is when these people attempt to break away from their mother country, they are usually urged by external forces, aided by external support from external sources, to actualize this dream. Okay. But were they matured enough, as at the time of existing the mother country, to be able to hold their own, or they were driven primarily by greed to say, I want to own my territory. And owning your territory, not for altruistic reason, but for personal aggrandizement. That is why the deputy president and the president are at loggerheads. It's not as if on personal note they have anything to contend with, but it's still the struggle for power.
Transitional government is what they share in South Sudan.
You understand? So it's struggle for power.
Right.
And in struggle for power, there will always be. And you know one funny thing, one terrible thing about some of these nations that I mentioned is it's usually the guerrilla warfare that they contend with. And conventional warfare is better managed than a guerrilla warfare. Okay. Look at what just happened. 2 killed, several injured.
In the convoy that was carrying the acting governor going to meet displaced persons.
That's what I'm saying. You see, those guerrillas are not going to wear the conventional uniform. So, and the greatest element of war is surprise. That happened, it was an ambush.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And so, imagine you traveling on a trip from Ibadan to Lagos. If you see people loitering around the express, the tendency for you to look around and say, maybe they are farmers, if there are no built-up areas. But if there are built-up areas, this must be likely maybe workers in those factories around here. But you never know if they are armed. And in those places, they don't wear the shirt and trouser like you and I wear. They wear jalabia. They wear robes. So tucked under that robe could be AK-47. And so, it's not going to end soon.
Okay.
Because the overarching target is the mineral resources embedded in that. And the people that are going to be the major beneficiary of this mineral resource,
yes,
just like in the Democratic of Congo, are the external backers who buy guns for them to fight each other so that they can make maximum gain. While they are busy fighting, looking at themselves, somebody is digging the ground to extract their mineral
extracting their mineral resources. Well, again, this conversation about this consistent fight between these two warring factions, I'm talking about President Salva Kiir of South Sudan and the first Vice President Riek Machar, particularly the part that, yes, there has been a transitional government and, of course, a peace deal signed in 2008, I beg your pardon, 2018, that has not been respected. Concerns are being raised about the fact that 2026, just a few weeks from now, is going to be the election in South Sudan, even with these kind of ambushment, that a governor cannot even drive past some corridors in a state. What should be expected in the election come 2026 with this kind of security situation that we find in South Sudan presently?
The optics are very clear. There's going to be escalated violence.
Come 2026? Come election period?
Yes, there will be escalated crisis because ordinarily it's not even ideal to go into an election when there is a crisis that has not been resolved, because it will escalate. What that means is, if election is allowed to hold, whoever becomes the bona fide executive president, the first target for him is to rout opposition. So opposition will not want him to get to that point where he will have the state resources at his disposal to rout him. And so the contention will continue. And the likelihood, except some big brothers ram it down their throat that this election was owed, there is likelihood that the election
now, ramming it round their neck is another conversation, Mr. Fanimo, because like you mentioned earlier, if a state is having this level of insecurity, and of course there is an election to be held in a couple of weeks or months from now, then isn't that more like a time bomb waiting to happen? Because as it stands, there are conversations about the fact that there has been peace conferences, peace deals worth millions of dollars, and the ordinary South Sudanese citizens is still not safe. Yet an election should be carried out. What does that portend for the political landscape of that country, as it were? Because right now, we're talking about the people who are having unity government in their country, still having internal rancors that has not been settled.
You see, we're still going in circles. There's a kind of platform on which you build. And you cannot build something on nothing. This is a crisis-prone environment. Ceasefire agreement had been breached. Peace deals that were signed have been breached. So what would you expect going forward?
Now, Mr. Fanimo, before you go further, you've been around for a while, particularly in the path of reporting. What is the risk of having a unity government like we have in South Sudan, where President Salva Kiir and First Vice President Riek Machar share almost same power in government? What's the risk of having such unity government?
You have two captains in a ship. It's headed to wreckage. That's what you get. Because each of the two gladiators who want to exercise authority over each other.
At the expense of the lives of the people in the country?
People. You see, you know, one funny thing about African leaders, because you are here, you are looking at the human factor in their politicking. But politicking at that level in Africa is devoid of the human factor. The human factor is considered statistics, data, not the flesh and blood in them. That's why they can afford to close their eyes and sacrifice thousands of people just for them to achieve what they want to achieve.
Now, this is really becoming something that we should not look away from. We're talking South Sudan. Let's move away from there and, of course, talk the DRC. A peace deal was signed in Washington just a couple of days ago, as brokered by Donald Trump and the UAE government. Now, as we speak, in Uvira, somewhere in the eastern part of the DRC, there are still fighting going on. What exactly is the crux of the matter, Mr. Fanimo, that you, after peace deal was signed and Donald Trump is announcing billions and millions of dollars of agreements between these two countries, we still have the warring factors still firing shots, even at civilians as well?
At the heart of this is the $34 trillion underground resource, the resources of that
in the DRC
country. Why is Rwanda meddling? Rwanda is to the north and Burundi is to the south. So they are contiguous countries.
Right.
Burundi is fighting, is pushing back because of the inherent refugee situation that could overrun Burundi if allowed.
Should this fighting continue?
You understand? Rwanda is fighting, aided, they are using Rwanda as launch pad to have incursion into
But there's been
DRC.
there's been some conversation about the fact that the Rwandan government is saying that they are protecting their Tutsi people in the DRC that are being marginalized.
There are some.
Is there a possibility
there are some Burundi nationals?
Yes.
In
DRC.
DRC.
Is there a possibility of having to
fight? I have
fight?
taken time to study the conflict in that place.
Right.
And I don't want to share that sentiment.
That they are protecting their own in another sovereign country.
It's just like Nigeria telling us that they foiled the coup in Republic of Benin because of the Yoruba element there. That's not plausible in international diplomacy.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay.
I've told you that Africa, as delineated, is a geographical expression. We have Nigerian nationals cut off in Cameroon. We have Nigerian national cut off in Niger. We have Nigerian national cut off in Republic of Benin. Should that be enough reason why your country should be used as launch pad, take-off point, to attack a neighboring nation that is contiguous to you, that you should share some level of affinity? In fact, the fact that there are Tutsis in DRC is enough for them to find a way to ensure that this crisis is resolved as quickly as possible so that it doesn't affect their nationals. Do you know why Russia has not gone full throttle against Ukraine? Because Russians are in Ukraine.
Okay.
And they don't want to decimate the ranks of Russians because it's a needless war if you have to kill your people to make a point.
Right.
So why would Rwanda, if not that Rwanda is being urged by external factors to pummel DRC so that they can have incursion into their resources?
Now, Mr. Fanimo, with this kind of offensive being put up by these M23 rebels, would there be any stricter consequences following the agreement signed in Washington by these two presidents of the two countries? I'm talking about Felix Tshisekedi and Paul Kagame. Would there be consequences on the path of the U.S.? I'm talking about on the path of the U.S. Would there be consequences for these nations?
U.S. is not even, at least under the current president in U.S., Donald Trump.
Right.
Donald Trump will not intervene in any country without something to take out of that country. And at the heart of his intervention, which he railroaded UAE to come into, to give a kind of cover of being altruistic, is the mineral deposit in this DRC. So
would the sentiments of some quarters be right when they say that the mediation of Donald Trump was not fully holistic, but rather it's about the natural resources?
The natural resources in DRC, everybody knows that, except if you have not been following it. In fact, in the days ahead, there is likely to be an escalation of crisis in that region. You understand?
As a result of not practically talking to the root of the situation.
So, yes. You understand? So it's one thing, there could be escalated violence in that axis. And Burundi will try to push back. Rwanda would open up its flanks for the rebels to launch attack from their own end. And in a way, pushing back and preserving Rwanda as a country. So it's a three-pronged approach.
All right, then. Some quarters have said, Mr. Fanimo, that one of the measures at which to really end this situation is to stop the sales of arms to these M23 rebels, even though there have been some allegations that some of these arms are being sold to these people by some foreign nationals. What do you say to consistent arm buying by these rebel groups?
The point is, the man producing arms is a merchant.
He's doing business.
He's into business and he wants to make profit. So you can't stop him from selling arms. He didn't force it on them. They approached him, and he has commodity to sell. He will sell. It's now your discretion to use it for protecting your territory or to assaulting part of your territory. So you can't stop the arms dealer from doing business.
And then sanctions cannot be placed on anybody who...
The point is it's not that regulated. It's not that regulated. In some countries, it's not regulated. You can buy arms off the shelf in some states in America.
Now, Mr. Fanimo, before I let you go and, of course, jump into another story, the city of Goma, Bukavu, now Uvira, in the eastern part of the DRC, very serious oil-rich strategic areas,
yes,
have been taken over by these M23 rebels. Could we still call this protecting the Tutsi people of Rwanda, according to what some quarters have been saying from Rwanda?
It's not protection. The whole idea is Kagame trying to get a slice of the cake, urging the rebels to make further incursion. And of course, there is a dividend if the rebels takes over government in DRC. After all, Rwanda helped in taking over government. So there will be some business deal.
All right, then, well, again, questions have been asked about the fact that families that are moving from the DRC to Burundi is of major concern. And of course, like you mentioned earlier, Burundi is also trying to manage their own situation. Yeah. But looking at the diplomatic ties between these two countries, should Burundi want to stay clear of the situation in the DRC, wouldn't that be termed as destroying diplomatic relations between these two countries? Because that's, again, is what some quarters are saying.
There's no way Burundi can stop engagement with DRC. Because the consequence of not pushing back diplomatically would ultimately impact negatively on Burundi.
Okay.
Because the influx of DRC people to Burundi would escalate if there is that serious incursion from Rwanda to DRC. Automatically, people want to run away from arm's way. And so the closest place to get to, which is Burundi, that is contiguous to DRC, would be the next point. And can Burundi accommodate the upsurge of refugees?
That really is the situation with Burundi, and that is why it's looking more like they're trying to even do more on the path of their security. But let's move away from that story and talk about the AGOA deal, of course, AGOA extension that has been approved by House Committee in Washington. There's a conversation about the fact that they would be excluding South Africa. What does that make of the entire deal? Because you would recall South Africa is almost about the only country that uses the AGOA contract, the AGOA agreement to sell more. So what does that portend for South Africa? Should there be an exclusion of South Africa from the AGOA?
I foresee an exclusion, except there is renewed escalation of diplomatic engagement between American government and South African government. Already, there is a kind of resentment from Trump in particular, American president, that the South African people are pushing genocide of the white supremacists. And so, if Trump or American government will not physically invade South Africa, the only plausible thing they can do is to choke them economically. And that's where they are headed.
I mean, some have said this is more like becoming a weapon to single out an African country because of a unique problem that, again, Mr. Trump is clearly talking about. But let's look at the fact that Donald Trump has said even the G20 summit South Africa would not be invited.
That's what I said.
That's like a major statement. And looking at this AGOA agreement, Mr. Fanimo, should there be an exclusion in the first place?
It's still the prerogative of a world power. It's still within the prerogative because they have it all. They hold the knife and the yam. And so, whatever they do, the first thing they do is to... Trump has not made any pretense about his position on economic strangulation of his trading partners in favor of America. And so, he had laid the foundation, and it's just for him to build on it. You recall that when he was sending people out of America, he personally welcomed South African whites, that he gave free passage without even breaching protocol in the process to come to America. Does that not tell you something? That this is the aftermath of that open invitation to whites?
Mr. Fatwa, there's also been the conversation about the fact that the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, is not thinking outside the box, particularly when it comes to how to do business with other countries. South Africa is a member of the BRICS nation, one that has made Washington, I'm talking about Donald Trump's administration now, say, we do not want to do so much with you when it comes to economy. Is there the possibility that Ramaphosa truly is not thinking outside the box by doing more business with these other nations, or is the business part of the South African economy clearly reliant on just Washington alone?
You see, the business climate in South Africa today is so fragile. And don't forget that America is going through a phase now that the Eastern Tigers, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians, are almost muzzling America. Do you know that some nations now don't trade their oil in dollars? So America is fighting a serious battle, economic battle. And so any quote unquote, any smaller nation that joins the fray is considered as American enemy. So while you are contending with the big nations, then another smaller nation that is just coming up will want to join the fray. So it's total alienation. And when you find yourself in a minority situation, you tend to fight more than when you are left alone. Now, America is fighting to remain the superpower that it used to be.
It's following
how far it can go is what we don't know.
Well, following what you just said now, concerns are also being raised about the fact that the African countries that will start doing business using AGOA will now have to be super loyal to the U.S. interest. Should they, like you said earlier, want to do any other business with any of the other nations that America is not in good terms with, it simply means they might also be excluded from AGOA. Is that what this means?
That is exactly what we are saying. There's no way it won't happen that way. Because America considers China, for instance, the so-called supposed altruistic fight for Christians in Nigeria was predicated on the business and economy on the part of America. And thank God we saw through it. That's why they are now sending their congressmen to negotiate. All
right, then, Mr. Fanimo, before I let you go, in 30 seconds, former president, I'm talking about Jacob Zuma's daughter, has been sworn in as an MP in South Africa. Clearly an indication
replacing
of the half-sister.
Half-sister.
Yes. What does that portend on the part of politics and godfatherism, you want to say, in Africa?
How did she emerge? Some people assisted in her emergence. Why didn't they kick? So if they agree, then who are we to say anything? And it's just the malice across Africa. Sit-tight leaders grooming their family. Look at Lauren Gbagbo. The wife is contesting. The woman that was almost stripped naked when the military came to flush him out.
Well, the excuse they gave for the half-sister of Jacob Zuma's daughter is the fact that she was part of the people who coerced or, let me use the word, advised South Africans to join in the fighting as machineries with Russia. Shouldn't that...
She has denied that.
Allegations that she has denied anyways.
How could you even level such allegations? It's too flimsy. These are adults. For you to pick your bag and say you want to go and fight a war, a proxy war, you must have had, you must have made your decisions clear.
Well, because of our time, really, this is where we have to draw anchor on the analysis segment of the African News. We've been talking with Mr. Dele Fadimo, a seasoned reporter right here in Nigeria, and also a political and public affairs commentator and analyst. Once again, thank you so very much.
It's always my pleasure.
We'll take a very short break right now. When we return, more stories on the African News will be up next. Please stay with us. Glad to have you back. It is still the African News right here in Voice of the People Television. Now to more stories. The United States has threatened to reduce its foreign assistance to South Sudan unless Juba lifts what it said were illicit fees on humanitarian shipments. In an unusually pointed statement entitled "Time to Stop Taking Advantage of the United States," the U.S. Bureau of African Affairs accused South Sudan's government of imposing exorbitant fees on humanitarian shipments and obstructing UN peacekeeping operations. The U.S., which has carried out rapid and deep cuts to foreign aid this year, is the largest humanitarian donor to South Sudan. The country of 12 million has been ravaged by conflicts since winning independence from Sudan in 2011. And from that story, we go straight talking some African business. South Africa's manufacturing output rose 0.2% on a year in October after rising by a revised 1.0% year on year in September. Statistics agency data showed on Thursday factory production increased 1.0% month on month in October after increasing by a revised 0.3% month on month in September. Well, with that particular business story, we go straight to talking sports. Comoros have announced their final 26-man squad for the 2025 Total Energies CAF African Cup of Nations, with head coach Stefano Cousin opting for stability while introducing two significant new faces ahead of the tournament in Morocco. Cousin has retained the backbone of the side that competed in both the AFCON and 2026 World Cup qualifiers, signaling a clear commitment to continuity as Comoros attempt to establish themselves once again as one of Africa's rising teams. But the Italian tactician has also refreshed key areas of the squad. Zahid Amir and Yanis Kari, both of whom impressed at the 2025 Arab Cup with the Comoros A team, have been handed their first senior tournament selections. This inclusion marks a notable evolution in the national team's long-term project as Cousin seeks to inject youthful energy around an experienced core. The squad features established leaders such as midfielder Youssef Changama, who remains the heartbeat of Comoros' creative play, and the versatile forward Faiz Slimani, considered one of the team's most decisive attacking weapons. The squad definitely is set for the AFCON tournament. And with that particular sports story, we've come to the end of African News right here in Voice of the People Television. Do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel. On YouTube at Voice of the People TV, and on all other social media platforms, we are at VOP TV Live. Thank you so very much for being a part of this broadcast. I am David Edwin. Do have a good afternoon.
What happens in the hush